Welcome to Dulcimoon, talk number 49.
Wow.
I know, it's so amazing. I love that we started counting these at the beginning, not knowing that we were going to keep them going, but we still counted them. And here we are at 49. So I'm Erin May. DJ Hal Morris is in the background helping with tech. And we are joined today by Ann Lough from Virginia now. We were just talking about Virginia and Western North Carolina have been places that you've called home. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And you play both the mountain and the hammered dulcimer, right? So
That's
you're
right.
one of our rare both dulcimer playing kinds, which I love. So you wanna tell us a little bit about your story of how you got into this music and making music on dulcimers?
Well, it's, I guess, a pretty long story. My love of traditional music goes way, way back. I won't tell you how many years, except I was coming of age, let's say, in the 60s. And I had an older brother that was in college, and he started bringing recordings of Peter, Paul, and Mary and Joan Baez. My mother played classical piano. I had had some piano lessons growing up too, but I had never heard folk music until
Mm.
the 60s. And I
And where
just,
did you grow up
I
in?
grew up actually in Northern Virginia, just 10 miles
Okay.
out of DC, except it was not anything like it is today. We always lived kind of out in the country, believe it or not, just 10 miles from DC. But it was great growing up because we were kind of rural, but we could be in DC. And so we had a lot of music, obviously, growing up, all the things that DC and orchestras and military bands offered for free. But anyway, I just fell in love with the ballads, the story songs and that. And
Mm.
so for my 15th birthday, I told Dad I wanted a guitar. And he got it for me, much to my mother's chagrin. She didn't want me to quit piano, which I didn't for a while anyway. But anyway, so that's how I really got into the ballads and and the folk music, never dreaming at that time that there were areas in our country that music was still a very vital part of the community and the tradition and the history
Right.
of the area. And that's kind of how I met my husband. After I graduated from high school, I tried college for a while, but then I came back and got a job in the DC area. And it just so happened that that I got a little place right outside of Arlington, a little condo and not or a duplex. And as it turned out, my husband, who was from Kentucky, was in the army, and it happened that the next door neighbor to us, who would see us out playing the guitar on the lawn, told my husband, who was working for him, "Hey, two chicks moved in to play guitar. You better go meet them." And so here he comes one day with his guitar, and he says, "Hi, my name's Rob Lowe." There was a hoot nanny going on, and that's that's how that all began. But we both sang music and the folk music. And fast forward that to after we were married, we just started. We went out to college in Utah and dropped out of school and hit the road. We were roadies for a while, but this would have been the late 60s, and that was after the folk music was going and off, and everything else was changing. So we hit the road for a couple years before the babies came, and we're doing more stuff like Carpenters and Creedence Clearwater and the Eagles stuff. But then the babies came and things changed. But when I went back to college, and we went to Murray State in Western Kentucky, and I started back to college, and I was very fortunate to have some wonderful teachers that appreciated the folk music. And one of them that knew I liked folk music brought me back a recording of Gene Ritchie from the Berea Festival, and that would have been, I think, about 1982. And that really, I always like to say, changed my life forever. I'd never heard the dulcimer, and this is Western Kentucky now. The dulcimers were more, of course, in the East,
Uh-huh.
well known in the East. So I went down to my local music store, and I said, I just heard this wonderful instrument. It was a little college music store. It's a small little college town. And I said, "This a dulcimer? Do you have one?" He says, "A what?" He had no clue what I was talking about. And of course, now the dulcimer, I think, is the Kentucky state instrument. But
Does
so
that
we,
mean that more people know what it is, or is it just a
yes,
word
yes,
they've
we have
heard?
spread the gospel. So he had a catalog and I found one. I should have gotten it out so I could have showed you, but
Oh,
I got the dulcimer in. It was $65. That was a lot of money back then. We saw the little Jean Ritchie dulcimer book, which I ordered, and it came in, and I sat down with that. And 3 hours later, man, I just couldn't put it down. I just was blown away by the sound of it. And I
oh.
went through Jean's book with all the different tunings. But the funny thing is, I took that dulcimer, I turned it over, and there was a little sticker on the back that said "Made in Taiwan." So I still have that Taiwanese dulcimer. It sounds pretty good. But anyway, that's what got me started, Gene Ritchie and that. But then,
Wow.
sometimes life gets in the way, and I kept having more babies. And to make a long story short, finally, after I graduated, we started a little family band called Home Remedy. My kids
Aw.
joined us, and
How many kids do you have, Anne?
I have four daughters. Yeah,
Oh.
daughters, yeah. And we started a little family band again, but of course doing folk music. And a friend of mine Mike Anderson, you might have known Mike or know Mike,
Yeah.
but we
I
were
got to
playing.
hang out with him at Lough this year and get to know him
Oh,
more. That
okay,
was
yeah,
really
we
nice.
were
Yeah.
playing. Our family band played out at Silver Dollar City in Branson for about 4 years in a row. Their Mountain Folks Music Festival
Yes.
until we moved to North Carolina, which we did in 1990. But anyway, he told us about this cool festival called Kentucky Music Week. And this was 1986, and that was
Oh.
maybe the second or third. So I went to that and was exposed to a lot more in the dulcimer. I played guitar and I played a little dulcimer and had heard of the hammered dulcimer and got a hammered dulcimer, but I hadn't had a lot of time to devote. But once we went there and got exposed to a lot more of the technique, that's really what set me going more. And then we moved
Hmm.
to North Carolina in 90, and I had heard about the folk school, the John Campbell Folk School, from a friend that did weaving, but I had no clue, the whole concept. But it was just 2 hours from where we lived in western North Carolina. So I sent my brochure down there looking for places to perform because I saw they had a fall festival. Got a call not long after that and said, would you be interested in teaching some hammered dulcimer? Because they hadn't had any hammered dulcimer there
Wow.
and very little mountain dulcimer at the time. So the first year I taught there was 91, and I've taught many, 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 many classes there over the years because we were
Wow.
so close of both mountain and hammered. So I guess that about tells the story.
Wow. What instruments did your kids play?
Um, my oldest daughter played with us the most, and she played banjo and upright bass and tin whistle, mainly those. And she clogged and stole the show
Oh,
when she did that. I still have,
yes.
yeah. So I still have one, and all the kids would play some with us, but it was mainly the oldest daughter. But my third oldest daughter now has continued with the mountain dulcimer, and she now lives a little closer to us. She was up in West Virginia and played a lot, but she's now just about an hour away, and
Oh,
we've been doing some
sweet.
stuff together, so that's always fun.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a soft place in my heart for little family bands and even finding dulcimers at little music stores because that was my story of getting started was
Okay.
that my dad walked into the local music store looking for an instrument that was not very expensive because my sister knew she wanted to play fiddle. My dad was playing mandolin. Mama was trying guitar a little bit. And I was taking piano lessons. And the
Uh-huh.
piano didn't fit in the car. So the question was, Aaron, what instrument do you want? And the answer was, I don't know. So my dad's like, don't spend a lot of money on this. And
Yeah.
somebody had come into that little music store, had asked about mountain dulcimers. They had opened the catalog, found the listing in the catalog, ordered it for that person, and that person never came back to claim the instrument that they
Ah,
had ordered.
was it made
So
in
it sat in
Taiwan?
this music store with people who were like, we think it's called a mountain dulcimer. Here's the catalog listing. And my dad offered them like $50 and they were like, sold. And that's how I got a mountain dulcimer.
So you were in a family band too then? Yeah.
Yeah, so my family played together and we traveled around a bit and did that little family music making and it's a really yeah, really
That's
fond
fun.
memories of
Yeah.
that.
I met
So,
you and your sister the first time at Lochapoka. We stayed in
Locha
a little
Polka,
we stayed
yeah.
in a little trailer there. They put us up in a trailer. Yeah. I was just so
Yeah,
blown
that's
away by
right.
you two. You were wonderful.
Aw. Yeah, I mean, I feel so fortunate to have had the childhood of being exposed to folk music. It's always really interesting to me because the thing that I know is like super obscure folk music.
Yeah,
And the thing I don't know is any pop music at all. So people are like, "Do you know this
yeah,
thing
right.
that's popular now?" And I'm like, "I'll go look it up."
Yeah, yeah.
And then they'll say, "Have you ever heard of this random shape note song?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I know
yeah,
that
yeah,
one."
yeah. Yep, yep.
But yeah, that's pretty magical.
Yeah.
Um, so t tell us a little more about John C. Campbell Folk School for folks who may not know about it. And I was scheduled to come to John C. Campbell for the
I
first time in
know.
2020,
I
and I didn't get
know.
to get there. So
I
one of these days,
know.
it's still on my bucket list, but I
I
know they're
hope
still kind
so.
of rebuilding how they're doing their programming. But tell us a
Yeah.
little about this place.
Well, it's just
Just
magical, and I've always loved to talk about it because it represents so much of, or it has in the past. I'm not sure, well, I better not say too much about it, but it started in 1925, so it's getting ready next year to celebrate its 100th birthday, and it's a long story I won't go into, but it started
wow.
kind of to help the local people, and it's pretty deep in a beautiful setting in southwest North Carolina, but to help the local people take what they already did well, and kind of like a
Mm,
settlement school that you hear about,
mhm.
like in Kentucky and different places, to help further education, literacy, that, but also it was a place to bring people together of local people. They had a cannery, they had a dairy, they started a wood carving, the Brasstown carvers, and so community would get together and do community canning. And it was also a time in 1925 when the outside world, people from off, as they say in the mountains, were getting interested in folk art. And
Uh-huh.
so the Campbell or Olive Campbell and a friend of hers, after John had died, he was not in. That was his dream, but he died before they started the school. And she saw what this beautiful stuff that people were doing, the quilting, the weaving, and that, and figured, maybe they could start earning some money by selling that outside of the mountains. And it was just utilitarian stuff, but that's how it got started. And over the years, it went through a lot of changes. From what I understand, in the 60s, it almost dissolved because of lots of things
Mm.
going on. But when I first started teaching there, actually, there was an interim director. But the next year, Jan Davidson came, and the whole crew that I was with most of the time. The music and dance director, Bob Dulcimer, wonderful guy. It was to me the beautiful time. It was just like big family, and it was so much was so much a part of the community because the community helped build it. So there'd be
Yeah.
evening
Yeah.
dances. It celebrated all the aspects of the traditions, not just the crafts, but the music, the dance, all real strong program. But things have changed. Directors have changed. Things have evolved. I hardly know anybody there now that was, there in the years that I was.
Yeah.
So I hope I've seen changes ever since they've had some different music directors and what they value as far as what's brought in and the type of classes. But I just hope they don't lose the sense of tradition. But if you have that
Mhm.
little picture, I want to
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yes,
Like I said, I
please.
taught many, many, many classes there over the years, and I was fortunate enough to live just 2 hours away. And when I was coming, it was hard. There weren't that many people that were not only qualified but could take the time to take a whole week off and come teach. So therefore, I got to teach a whole lot, and so over the years, I've taught hundreds, and I think my favorite classes to teach still are beginning classes because I love to see people who said, "Oh, I've never played music. I don't." You got your work cut out for you. You probably have run across that too.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so a lot of the classes there are beginning classes, and I would always really enjoy that. And I was at the folk school last, when was that? August, yeah. And one of the other instructors who I knew very well over the years came up to me. She says, "I want to show you a picture." And that's the picture you see on your screen there. It's her 105-year-old mother. And she said, "I want to tell you that my mother took your class like early 90s to learn how to play the mountain dulcimer. And she says now she plays every day. And that's what keeps her going. And I tell you what, I teared up when I saw that picture. I didn't recognize her, of course, that back. But her 105-year-old mother learned to play the dulcimer, and she must have even then been 70 something or what. But a lot of the people that come to the classes because they have the time and money are retired folks, and
Yeah.
they want to do something new. And she was one of those. And so I saw that picture. That just goes to show you, you know. And we all know that the value of music, but it's something you can take with you. And probably you all too. I got so many little notes over the years that talked about thanking me for teaching them the dulcimer and saying it's the music that got them through difficult times, whether the loss of a spouse or just something that, you know, health or something that went wrong. And even in COVID, I had one dear woman write me a note. She said, "Ann, if it hadn't have been for the dulcimer, I don't think I could have survived COVID." So, you know, the
Yeah.
music and that has just been so powerful. And I just feel blessed to be able to share the music, and also to be blessed and to live in areas that supported this music. Western North Carolina, and now where I am in Southwest Virginia. Very, very old, strong tradition too in music. The Galax dulcimer, we're just a little over an hour from Galax, and the Crooked Road Music Trail, and the Carter Fold, and all of
Oh,
that. You know. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, those are places that whenever I go to visit them, I think, oh, I was born in the wrong place. My whole family, for as many generations back as we have the history of them, like my family were covered wagon people who came to
Yeah,
Kansas and
yeah,
settled.
yeah,
And I think Kansas, really? Because
yeah.
the musical culture and traditions are just not nearly as deep a rooted part of the culture and traditions here,
Yeah.
and certainly not within my extended family. Like my family, my parents were the first ones to play
Ah.
instruments in either of their family sides, and they did that as adults, and my dad stuck with it and my mom didn't. She actually has terrible stage fright, and my dad is very extroverted and loved being on stage. So my dad was gonna always play music on stage, and he was always gonna ask my mom to keep coming on stage if she played an instrument. So she was just like, I think I'm good. I'll be the backstage person
There you
who
go. There you
isn't
go.
playing an instrument. But so I grew up in music, but I didn't grow up with the generations of music
Yeah.
making, and I didn't grow up with a culture around me of that music. And I can remember the first time my family drove to North Carolina, and we like crossed over the mountains. We're in North Carolina, and we stop at a McDonald's because they always have clean bathrooms. And so we're stopped at a McDonald's. We're gonna get ice cream cones and use their clean bathrooms. And there were like five or six little old guys, the little like coffee klatch group with instruments jamming in the McDonald's. And we all were looking at each other like, this is real? This
Yeah.
is really how it is?
Well, Aaron, don't give up, because I was in my 40s when we moved to North Carolina. And when we were in
It is
Western,
definitely on my list. I have said
yeah,
for years, if I was going to live in any state besides Kansas, where all of my family roots are,
yeah.
it would be North Carolina. So,
Well, Virginia, Southwest Virginia is pretty rich too. So,
okay, good. I'll put that on the list.
yeah. Yeah, when we lived in Western Kentucky, you know, we played the music and we played a lot of the state parks and that. But it was a curiosity because the tradition wasn't strong there, although it had been, and in Kansas too. But because, you know, mountains were so isolated, it stayed rooted a lot longer,
Yeah.
even though that
Yeah.
music went through those areas. But you'd be fortunate if somebody paid you $25 and offered to feed you, you know. So coming to North Carolina made a huge difference in opportunity to share the music. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have favorite music to play and listen to at this point? Is it still the ballads for you?
Well, you know, that's my first love, and I one of the other things that I've done beside, you know, just the dulcimer is I got in when we lived in Western North Carolina right after I finished a master's down at Western Carolina, and I was very fortunate that the lady that was in charge of the master's program loved traditional music and shape note singing and all of that. So she got me involved and my to festivals and that in the area. But back, I guess 91, the same year I started teaching at the folk school at Lake Junaluska, and a lot of the retreat centers in that area would sponsor Elder Hostel, it was called back then. And it was continued learning for adults. Used to have to be 55, and now it's called Road Scholar. And it's a wonderful worldwide program there that they have. And at Lake Junaluska, well, Western Carolina was hosting it at Lake Junaluska, and they just invited me to do an evening program for a group of Elder Hostel that was there. And my teaching nature, I guess, it wasn't just a performance. I was talking a lot about the music and that, and they came up and said, "Hey, wouldn't you like to teach a week-long class for us in the Elder Hostel program?" So I started teaching music and culture of the Southern Appalachians, and that has just been a joy over the years. So I taught as many as 6 to 10 of the weeks a year in the Western North Carolina area, at Montreat, and they're up to last year. When we moved up here, it was Montreat was still sponsoring them, and I was teaching about 6 or 7 a year for them. But I was having to travel down there, and I expanded the programs that I taught there. And that's a place that when I would teach the Appalachian music and culture, I would always, just for maybe a half an hour of one of the sessions, I did everything from the ballads to the play parties to the dance, the storytelling, all that kind of stuff. But for about a half an hour in one of the sessions, I'd bring out all my cardboard dulcimers, because I had done also visiting artist work in the area for years with the dulcimer and singing and dancing. And I can't tell you how many people, probably some that you might know, have seen at festivals, that with that half-hour cardboard dulcimer by all them cabbage got so turned on, and got a dulcimer, or just it changed their life, because of the social nature, and of course the music as well. So that's been very rewarding too, to work. But I just couldn't keep going down there for a whole week, and my husband isn't in real good health, so I've been cutting back on the out of town stuff. But this area fortunately is rich enough and the virtual that I can still do a lot of things. Yeah, keep it going.
Yeah. What are your degrees in? Are they
Music,
music?
music education, both of them. Yeah. And I had 2 years as an undergrad, when I got my undergraduate, where I had done my music, my student teaching at the high school level. That teacher had to leave because her husband was transferred, so they offered me the job right out of fitting. But I was older. I was in my 40s by then, early 40s, because I kept going back after the kids. Then when the fourth one came, I waited till she started kindergarten. So I was a long time finishing my degree as one of what they call the mature students in college.
Well,
But
good
anyway,
for you. And I
yeah,
love that. I mean, so often I even at times have had this mentality of like, if I don't do it now, then it's an impossible thing for it to ever
yeah,
happen later. And
all the time.
I think it's very, very important to hear stories of coming back to a thing
Yeah.
that piqued your interest and
If it would have
doing
been
it
anything but
between
music,
babies
yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah.
If it was anything but music, I couldn't have done it, but I loved it so much. But anyway,
Yeah.
they offered me the job as the choral for high school and middle school. I lasted 2 years and retired. I love the kids, I love the music,
Yeah.
but the administration didn't value choral music, and I was of an age, and I was more mature. I just wasn't going to put up with all the how they just kind of brush you aside, and you're not all that important. You should just
Yeah.
be after school. It shouldn't even be, so
Oh, goodness.
I know it was not a supportive environment. And then we moved to North Carolina and finished my master's, but that was excellent because it introduced me. Again, I've been in the right place at the right time, and I think it's divine providence. I really do, because of the people that I met here in Western North Carolina, and opened up so many doors for me. Yeah.
Yeah. My husband and I talk a lot about being lucky. Like it feels like we've gotten lucky a few times with just certain moves we made at just the right time. And I think it's sort of some combination of that, like divine providence and luck, and also having that like curiosity and that desire to keep learning and growing, pursuing the new things so that when the opportunity is there,
Mm-hmm.
you go, oh, this
Oh,
is an
yeah.
opportunity and I should grab hold of it.
Uh-huh.
And that is what makes the divine providence and the
Oh,
timing
that's,
and
yeah.
the luck of it actually do something in your life because you said, here's an opportunity and I'm gonna grab it by the coattails and do the thing.
Yeah. Well, that a good example of that is when he called me to teach at the folk school. He wanted me to teach hammer dulcimer, and that was I was much more proficient, and I had had taught like a little workshop for an hour or two, different places back in Kentucky, but I was much more versed on the mountain dulcimer by then. I said, "Gee, teach a whole week, 6 hours a day." Would I be able to? And I almost said no, but I'm so glad I did because again, but it gave me they always booked a year in advance, so it gave me a whole year to prepare for it.
There's nothing like a deadline to really,
Yeah. But
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So when you think about teaching folk music and you've taught it in all these different contexts in sort of adult continuing education that's not instrument specific and
Right.
adult education that is instrument specific, and you've done the programs at schools and you've taught dance too, I know, like the folk dancing. When you think about putting together these programs, like what is it that you're trying to help people get from the classes?
Hmm.
What inspires you or like keeps you
Yeah,
coming back
well,
to
just
doing
the
that?
joy of it to start with. Just the
Yeah.
joy of the dance and music. I always like to say, when you see people dancing, they're always smiling, and the idea of community. I'm very
Yeah.
anti-competition, you know.
Me too.
That's what I love about the folk school. It's you just exploring for your own self. It's not competitive at all. And I think when you take that aspect out of these, people really can just enjoy community, and it is, as you know, a big a community thing.
Yeah.
And also, I just feel strongly about tradition and keeping traditions alive and understanding where we come from and the value of different aspects of our tradition that we don't need to let die because it's a part of who we are. Yeah.
For people like me in Kansas or DJ in California who are physically far away from the roots of the dulcimer traditions in the Appalachian region,
Mhm.
do you have some resource recommendations? Where would you point people to learn more about some of the traditions if
Yeah.
coming to the place and experiencing it with your boots
Yeah.
on the ground, which is lovely and I highly recommend it. But if that isn't available right now, where
Yeah,
would
yeah.
you have people start?
Gosh, that's hard. First of all, that I don't think people realize how much of the tradition of the Appalachians was there, in the area, like I was saying earlier, because 85% of the people that settled in the southern Appalachians were of Scots-Irish origin. And one of the classes that I have taught through Elder Hostel is the legacy of Scots Irish. Why they got called Scots Irish when they left Ulster, why they came and all that. But they didn't come here just to the mountains. They were Chisholm is a Scots Irish name. They went out west, they went up north, but because of modernization and those traditions died out. So I think people would be surprised how much of their background or the history of the area where they live at one time had a lot of these traditions. The play party, I ran across a book in one of the libraries when I was out somewhere doing a school, the big thick book of just Nebraska play parties that were collected in Nebraska. And the whole
Wow.
idea, the wagon trains, they did the play parties and the music was they went out west, and but that died out because modernization and things changing, but not so here. But I always like, if people have not read Jean Ritchie's book Singing Family of the Cumberlands,
Such
I
a good
recommend
one.
that to everybody. That gives you such a sense of the place of music, in the lives of the people here in the mountains. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I love that book. And she's such a beautiful writer
Yeah,
too.
oh,
I mean,
gift of
I knew
words.
that she
Yes.
was had written songs, but I always think of Jean Ritchie as the dulcimer player, right?
Right.
And when I started reading that book, it was like, oh, she just puts you in the scene in such a powerful way.
Right. Her
It's
publishers wanted her to change a lot of the language in that book so it would be more, sophisticated. She wouldn't do it. Good for her because her patterns of
yeah,
speech there and everything. But she was so gifted with words, very much so. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, I was thinking about what you were talking about legacy and heritage and things, and
Mhm.
um, last summer I got to spend a little bit of time in Germany, and I
Ah,
my ancestry is very German, especially on my mom's side. And I got to this place and found a person who knew a lot about the sort of traditional instrumental and dance music
mhm.
in early German culture. And I said, well, where in Germany was that kind of happening? And he named the county or the state that my ancestors were from. And I was like, maybe it is in my blood after
There you
all. Because,
go.
I had
There you
had this
go.
experience of feeling like I don't belong in this place. I belong in North Carolina. And none of my ancestors, as far as we know, have like the Scots Irish heritage. I don't have
Uh,
any of that in me. And I was like, I'm just this weird misfit. And then I found
yeah.
out, oh, maybe my old early family heritage was the
Yeah.
instrumental dance music in northern Germany, and
You're
that
the
made me
Scheitholz,
feel
So maybe
yeah,
you're the
like
Scheitholz.
it
Yeah. Well, that's why
is.
I'm German on my mom's side too, but dad's Irish. So, my husband said that's a bad combination, German and Irish.
Yeah, there's some deep stubbornness in both of those
Yeah.
cultures, isn't there? Um, so I I won't keep you too long because we try to keep these to around a half an hour, but I am always curious, what are the creative practices that you sort of incorporate into your overall life? And as a person who's centered a lot on the community part of music making, which is something I really deeply value
Mhm.
too, how do you make sure you're making space for it and like keep the creative energy and juices flowing in the times when it feels harder? and
Ah,
and you had the experience of raising four kids and making time for that, so how would you encourage women who feel like it's on the back burner for them, but they want to maybe bring more music into their lives and more of this like artistic expression?
boy, it can be frustrating. I knew, of course, when I had my four girls and they were young and all in school, and I was going back to school, and there wasn't a lot of time for creativity. But there was time for creativity in other ways. And I think I always loved to garden. I love to, one of the things I could do when my kids were little and they weren't in school yet, but they were watching Captain Kangaroo, I could sit and crochet or, so there's something in me that likes to be busy with my hands and create in other ways too. And
Yeah.
that keeps at least the feeling that you're creating instead of always just cooking and washing and running after kids. That there's always, I think, a space that you can find something to do that feeds you beside
Hmm.
just the music, and I think that's important too. And
Yeah.
just I love getting out and hiking, and it's just taking in the beauty of creation, if you will. And we've been very fortunate in the places we live, the mountains and that to have that opportunity too. But there are times when I almost feel I don't need to be doing so much because I want to spend more time with my music. And that's one of the things when I retired from the Rhodes Scholar in North Carolina beginning this year. That was one of my goals. I'm going to have more time to just to sit down with music and not feel guilty if I'm practicing or just creating. So it's
Hmm.
always a struggle.
What has come out during this year of focusing more on that?
I think just I more practice individually.
Hmm.
That's something I always crave. It's just practice time. You probably know too. When you're preparing music to teach and you're actively teaching, you don't always have time to develop your own skills and continue to learn yourself. And that's
Hmm.
something I've really been striving more for this year to do is just I have that carved time for me to develop as a performer. Or I don't really want to say a performer, but as a musician. Yeah,
Hmm.
hone my skills that don't always have time to get to. Yeah,
Yeah.
I always found it. I feel lucky to be able to sit down for an hour and play just practice because I don't always have that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your favorite way to practice? Do you have like an order of things you try to do or?
I always like to, be going over some old stuff, but I always like to be trying something new, um,
Hmm.
and something that might challenge some of my skills. Expand my hammered dulcimer. I've had Masterworks for years. I'm a dealer with them, but the newest one I got is the Russell Cook Edition extended range, and that was I got what 3 years ago now. I'm still trying to figure out where some of those notes are in that extended
Yeah,
range.
you got the extended range, and what have you done?
Yeah, I've got notes there I haven't used much, and yeah, so things like that. Just exploring,
Yeah.
and I like to explore some different kinds of music, but not so much that some of you young kids do. But there's classical, there's just different kinds of music besides just the real traditional that I enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite things about studying music is that there's always another kind of music to study.
Hmm.
Like I start to think, okay, I've kind of got a grasp of this one, and then I realize that this other kind of music is like connected to it, but not quite the same, and it's got this little different
Yeah.
twist. And now I want to go learn everything I can. One of my current quests is Scottish Strathspeys.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They're just so hard for me right now. And so I'm like, I gotta figure out how to play Strathspeys.
Uh-huh. They're definitely rhythmic, aren't they?
They are. And it's like, well, I've played Irish music and I've played bluegrass music and I've played old time music and they're all somehow sort of connected. And yet none of that prepared me to be able to play Strathspeys well. So it's a whole new thing that's like, I don't know. It just feels really magical to me that no matter how much or how long you've studied music and taught music and you've learned traditions of it, then you like open a door just a crack and you realize there's a whole other area of exploration
Hmm.
just waiting. So,
Always something new to learn in there. And
hmm.
I guess that's something I always try to pass on to students. Don't ever think you've gotten there. 'Cause there's always something new to learn or new technique or that.
Yeah, and the flip side of that coin is don't be discouraged that you haven't gotten all of it yet because that isn't available to anyone either. Oh no, it froze, and I don't know if it froze on my end or your end. Hang on, don't go anywhere.
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. There, well, my
Slight glitch.
computer does something sometimes, and it cuts off for just a minute or so, and it says the internet connection is unstable, and I think that's with my provider. Is
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
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 Well, thank you so much for sharing your life story with us today and
Yeah.
talking about the importance of carrying on the folk traditions and for all of the work that you have done over the years to make sure that the traditions and the stories and the culture of the Appalachians is being taught and passed on and carried on. And I feel really lucky to know you and to
Oh.
have gotten to sit next to you a few times and
Yeah.
hear some of those stories and watch the way you teach. Um, it is very clear in every conversation I've ever had with you how passionate you are about just sharing the stories and the love of the music and the traditions. So thanks for being out there and
Well,
doing
and
this
I
work.
feel so good to have young folks like you, to know there's young folks like you carrying it on. So that's always So many of us are aging out, but we need you young folks in there to
We'll
keep
try to
going.
just keep passing the torch down over and over and over again, right? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks to all of you who've been watching for joining us. If you've got questions or comments for Anne, you can leave them in the chat. We'll make sure she sees questions and can respond to them even later on if you are watching this afterwards and you want to ask a question. So, very good. The next Dulcimoon talk we're actually going to do next week. It is talk number 50, and DJ has been working really hard to put together sort of a montage collection of some of the highlights of the first 49 talks, and she and I will be gathering next week to celebrate number 50 and the stories that we have heard so far and the future of Dulcimoon talks, which very much we plan to continue on. And we have a long list of more people we hope to hear their stories. So stay tuned for all of that. Thanks. That was fabulous.
Thank you, Erin.